everyone, welcome to REST API Automation Testing tutorial that can be done with the help of REST Assured API. So as usual, every course of ours starts from basics to the framework level. Okay, so before we deep dive into the course, let's see some basic FAQs which you need to know, right? So first, what is REST Assured? If you see here, I have written REST Assured API in the brackets. So first let's try to understand what link we have between this REST Assured API and this API automation. So REST Assured is a jar file which is used to automate REST APIs. Okay, so if you have familiar about Selenium, so how Selenium does, it is used for web automation. In the same way, REST Assured jars are used for REST API automation. Okay, so let's see the basic definition of this REST Assured from their official website. Hit REST Assured. So the first line you see here is testing and validating REST services. So that means you can test and validate all the REST APIs using this REST Assured API, right? So that's the basic definition about this REST Assured. So in our entire course, we will use this REST Assured jars to automate our APIs, right? So before we take this second question, like, is API automation trending in the current IT market? Of course. So till the last year, probably from the last 5 to 6 years, we are hearing a lot about automation. So automation in the sense, so most of us know that in the web perspective only, like web automation, like opening the browser and clicking on the buttons, making sure text is displaying on the page. So that can be done with the various tools like QTP, Selenium, etc. And now, where exactly this API comes into picture here? So API go and sits in business logic layer. So if you test web, that means it is in presentation layer. So the data we are getting to this presentation layer from that business logic layer. So these APIs go and sits in that business logic layer and sends the data to presentation layer. Okay. So now, till now we are testing the presentation layer, okay, in the form of web automation. So in the current trend, slowly this testing focus is shifting from presentation layer to business logic layer, where exactly this API sits. Okay, so doing this API automation, in the sense we are actually testing the core business logic just to make sure to all the business scenarios are coming as expected. Okay, and you have a lot of advantages with API automation where you can get the response within seconds, whereas with web automation it takes time to exactly navigate to that specific page. Okay, so more about this API automation and what exactly is REST API architecture we would discussing in our coming lectures. Okay, we have discussed a lot with the practical examples too. So here what I'm trying to explain is how the testing focus is shifting to this API automation. So I'll show you the proof. So there is a website called Indeed. So I hope most of you know that. It is majorly a big job portal. So basically what it does, it gives us job trends. So what specific tool is currently trending in the market. So now let's go and say this REST API testing. And let's see how that trend is increasing. Yeah, see here. From 2012, see that the graph of the jobs for this specific keyword is increasing. And you can see clear increasing the graph from compared to 2012 to 2017. Okay, so day by day the testing is slowly focusing to that business logic layer where exactly this API sit. Okay, so that's how the importance of this API automation is growing day by day. And in the same way, this Google guys came up with this REST Assured API, just like Selenium for web, and this is playing major role in automating that because this is an open source. Okay, this is not any paid tool. You can just download this REST assured jars with single click, and you can use in your project and start automating this REST APIs. Okay, as it is an open source, so it has a lot in the demand. So coming back to the third feature, do I need to have any basics as a prerequisite to learn this?
Right. So let's get started with REST API basics. Now, what is REST API? REST API defines a set of operations where developers can perform the request and receive the responses via HTTP protocol. So this is like basic thin line which describes about REST API, but let's try to understand with this with one of our practical example. Okay, so this is an kind of architectural for REST API design. Now let me take one example and illustrate this. Yeah. So first, let's assume that you are developing an application related to traffic news. Okay. So you will describe the traffic news based upon the zip code you provide, like how is the traffic going on the specific highways. So that was your application. And also as a feature, you were also providing weather report when provided zip code. Okay, so your aim is to give the traffic update as well as weather report for that particular location of what input provided by the user. Okay, so this is our basic possibility in our UI. Here the weather location, there is a weather database. This is external party which have the weather report of each and every place in United States. Okay, so in our application we need to access this weather report database, but this is a third party device. Okay, so because you will not have that report, right? Maybe there is some other party working on all the weather reports on different cities of the United States. For example, there is weather.com. If you go there, you will have the weather report of each and every place in the world. Now, in my application, I need to access this database to find out the weather of particular location. But unfortunately, this is third-party device and we will not have access to this. Okay, so how can we achieve this then? So here comes REST API into scenario. Now, these REST APIs can behave as intermediate layers between our application layer and backend layer and gets the data from this database. But how? This can be achievable with the help of REST API HTTP calls. Now, so what we does, we write a simple code. Firstly, so here user gives the zip code. Okay, let's say 1123, some random zip code to find the weather report in New York. So when they pass 1123 in our application, so we need to build one REST API saying, first of all, convert that zip code into city name, because this weather report gives the weather or based upon the city name we provided. But in our application, we are asking to provide by zip code, right? So this REST API, let's say I'm just assuming we are writing one REST API which converts that zip code to particular city name which it belongs to, and then use specific queries to hit this database to get the weather report for that particular city name. So all those logic is written in this middle layer, specifically called business logic layer. So because this is our business logic, when zip code is provided, I am converting that into specific city, and that's with that city name I am giving a call to this database to bring out the weather of that particular city. So all those code will be wrapped into an API. Okay, all those code is wrapped into one API call, and this API call hits this database to get that weather report. Okay, so this is what here it's saying. Whether it may be Android app, iPhone app, or browser. So whatever the front end layer you have, okay, it is irrespective of the platform. The REST APIs are purely based on HTTP calls. Okay, so now you are requesting the data, the XML data. So basically, if you want to get the weather report of particular zip code, you need to ask this REST API in the form of JSON data or XML data. Okay, so it doesn't matter. For example, here this Android app is built on Android and iPhone is built on iOS and browser is web maybe on Java or .NET or AngularJS. It's irrespective of language it built. We just simply put a request in form of JSON or XML to this REST API call. Okay, because REST API call takes input in format of JSON or XML. Now, once we hit a request to this API, this API parses this request, and based upon this request it performs its logic and sends the request to backend. Okay, so it talks to backend in the form of HTTPS. Okay, so once it talks to the backend gives you the specific, maybe it's a 35 degrees Fahrenheit or 12 degrees centigrade. Backends give response to again REST API, and this REST API gives back response to our UI in form of JSON or XML again. So basically the request we are sending in the form of JSON XML, and the response also we get from the JSON XML. Okay, we are not bothered about this backend layer. You only need to ask your REST API service about that specific weather on that zip code. So it's REST API duty to convert this zip code into the city and calling that specific database to get that Fahrenheit or centigrade for that specific city. Once it gets the data, it passes back to UI front end layer and it will be displayed in our application. Okay, so remember in our sites, for example, we have a zip code field and we ask a zip code to enter. So once we enter, there is button maybe called go. So if we click on that go, the weather temperature is displayed at the bottom. So how it happens? So here, when you enter zip code and click on go button, automatically in the back end, the request went as JSON XML with that zip code, and REST API receives that request and it parses and makes sure that it calls the database and send back response with that specific whatever the centigrade it is, 42 or 45. Okay, so that is how REST API acts as a business logic layer between the server and your front end layer. So here you need to understand that sometimes this REST API can be designed by us, or sometimes it can be given by third-party service only. Now, for example, we may not have rights to hit this weather.com database and to get a response. Okay, why someone allows us to hit their database? So what does weather.com domain does? It gives us a REST API. It exposes the REST API saying, hey, you can use our REST APIs, and if you want to get weather report, just pass city name in your JSON XML so that my REST APIs connect to my database and gives you the response. Okay, so in most of the times, these REST API calls will be exposed by these third-party services only, because sometimes we may also write our own APIs, but we may not have access to hit their database. Okay, because this REST API should talk, right, to this weather report. So, but they might not allow. So apart from that, they itself provide their REST APIs, they expose their REST APIs, and they give to any other third-party services to use that. So we, in our website building, pick out their REST APIs and use this to retrieve the temperatures of the different cities. Okay, this is a scenario. This is how it happens at the back end. Okay, now let's shift back to our architecture here. And now you see, so the reason why I have given Android, iOS browser is, it is independent of what platform you are building your application. If you want something from third party, and if they have exposed their REST API, you can simply ask in the XML format or JSON format and you get response from that third party. You need not, let's say this third party was built in Java, but your code may be built in .NET. No need to worry, because REST API is independent of language. It doesn't matter whatever the language the third party service or application layer is built in. It just reads something in XML or JSON and gives something in XML or JSON. So that's why these REST APIs are becoming very popular in these days. Okay, so let's learn more about this. And one more interesting REST API which is commonly used across any website is Google Maps. Remember, in every website we use the Google Maps. So in the next lecture, let's try to understand how the Google Map API works. Okay, so first, if we understand where this REST API is internally working behind the architecture, and then you'll have clear idea on how to test it and what parameters you need to consider while testing. Okay, so that's the reason I'm specifically trying to make you understand about this. So I'll talk about one more scenario of Google Maps, and you will get clear idea on what these APIs are. Okay, let's meet in next lecture. Thank you.